A razor blade cannot fit between the stones of certain ancient walls. This is the stunning reality of megalithic precision, a forgotten art that produced structures modern tools cannot replicate. By the end of this journey, you will understand the secrets behind 25 of the world's most impenetrable walls and the civilizations that built them. We will travel from the cloud forests of Peru to the islands of the Pacific, uncovering stones cut with impossible accuracy. How could cultures separated by oceans and millennia arrive at the same perfect technique? And what knowledge did they possess that we have since lost? What does it say about us that the most enduring things we build are often the ones we understand the least? That simple test with a razor blade reveals a secret far deeper than a perfect fit. It points to a philosophy of building, one where the wall is not merely assembled but becomes a single, interlocked entity. This is the essence of megalithic precision, a dry stone technique that defies our modern assumptions. Imagine trying to build a massive, permanent structure without any cement, glue, or mortar to hold it together. Your only materials are enormous stones, some weighing many tons, and your goal is to make them fit so perfectly that the seams virtually disappear. This is what cultures from the Andes to the Pacific achieved. The joints are so tight that not only can a thin blade not penetrate, but in many cases, not even a sliver of light can pass through. How is such a thing possible with what we assume were simple bronze or stone tools? Archaeologist Jean-Pierre Protzen spent years studying the Inca methods at sites like Sacsayhuamán. He proposed a process of profound patience and tactile genius. Stonemasons would carefully shape a polygonal block, not to a predetermined blueprint, but through a constant conversation with the stone it was meant to join. They would carve a slight hollow into the receiving face of the wall, then repeatedly lower the new block onto it, checking for high spots. Each time, they would peck away at those points of contact, gradually refining the fit through what seems like a monumental game of trial and error. The result was not a straight line, but a complex three-dimensional puzzle where each irregular block locks its neighbors in place from multiple angles. This irregularity is the true source of its strength, especially against earthquakes. A straight, horizontal joint is a line of weakness, a place where seismic waves can focus their energy and cause a wall to topple. But a wall built from interlocking polygons has no straight fault lines. It can flex and sway as a unified mass, the stones grinding against each other during a tremor only to settle back into their original, immovable embrace. This level of construction required more than muscle. It demanded a generational understanding of geometry, of material behavior, and an almost sacred patience. It makes you wonder if we have lost a form of knowledge that isn't written in books, but is passed from hand to eye, from one careful craftsperson to the next, over centuries. This architectural language, written in stone, was spoken fluently across the globe, from the mountaintops of Peru to the islands of Japan, from the shores of the Mediterranean to the highlands of Ethiopia. A strikingly similar building signature appears. It is the fingerprint of megalithic precision, a testament to a shared human impulse to build something that would outlast empires, languages, and memory itself. Our journey will take us to 25 specific walls that embody this phenomenon, structures so perfectly crafted they seem to defy their own weight and the relentless passage of time. We will walk among the Cyclopean blocks of Mycenaean Greece, puzzle over the conical towers built by the Nuraghic people of Sardinia, and stand before the colossal stoneworks of ancient Okinawa. What becomes astonishing is not just the individual achievement, but the pattern. Cultures with no known contact, separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, independently arrived at the same brilliant conclusion. that the ultimate strength lies not in binding materials, but in a perfect interlocking fit. This global echo has sparked profound questions. Thought leaders like Graham Hancock look at this widespread pattern and see the potential traces of a lost chapter in human history, perhaps a shared archaic knowledge carried by seafaring ancestors. Mainstream archaeology, while acknowledging the mystery, often points to a process called convergent evolution, where different societies, facing similar challenges of defense, monumentality, and seismic activity, can independently develop similar technological solutions. It is the architectural equivalent of wings evolving separately in birds, bats, and insects. The need to build something permanent and impenetrable may simply lead brilliant minds down the same path of logic and stone. Yet the sheer sophistication of this path continues to captivate us. Why did so many ancient builders from so many corners of the earth choose the most difficult method possible, a method that demands generations of patience and a master craftsperson's touch? The answer may be written in the walls themselves, and to read it, we must begin our survey with one of the most iconic examples, where the stones are not just fitted, but seem to flow like liquid metal frozen in time. These walls rise above Cusco like the petrified teeth of a mountain, a series of colossal zigzag ramparts known as Sacsayhuamán. To stand before them is to feel a profound shift in scale, where human achievement is measured in stones that dwarf buses, some weighing well over 100 tons. Yet their immense mass is contradicted by their delicate precision. This is the birthplace of the pillow-faced style, where each granite block is masterfully rounded at its edges, creating a subtle, beveled joint that fits against its neighbor with a snugness that still baffles engineers today. The 16th century chronicler Garcilaso de la Vega, born of Inca and Spanish heritage, wrote that these walls were built by giants, a poetic explanation for a feat that seemed superhuman. The reality, while less mythical, is no less extraordinary. Inca stonemasons, using stone hammers, bronze chisels, and patient abrasion with sand and water, engaged in a monumental dialogue with the rock. One compelling theory suggests they may have used plant acids from local herbs to slightly soften the stone's surface, making the final polishing possible. The result is a three-tiered fortress of interlocking polygons, a defensive labyrinth that also served as a sacred ceremonial site, intimately tied to the cosmology of the Inca capital below. Its true genius, however, is revealed not in stillness but in movement. This region is seismically active, shaken regularly by powerful earthquakes that have toppled countless modern buildings. Yet Sacsayhuamán stands unshaken. The irregular, pillow-faced joints allow the entire structure to flex and sway as a single, resilient entity during a tremor, the stones settling back into their ancient embrace once the ground grows still. It is a perfect marriage of immense strength and graceful flexibility, a testament to a civilization that understood its environment not as an adversary to conquer, but as a partner to harmonize with. This wall is not just a barrier, it is a lesson in resilience written in stone. The staggering walls of Sacsayhuamán are only the beginning of the Incas' architectural story. A short journey through the sacred valley leads to Ollantaytambo, where the scale of ambition shifts from a fortified citadel to a monumental act of sheer will. Here, scattered along a mountainside, lie the massive rose-colored stones known as the Tired Stones, blocks of rhyolite so enormous they appear to have given up their journey halfway, resting forever on the slope. Their name tells a story, but the true narrative is how they arrived here at all. These megaliths, some weighing over 50 tons, were quarried from a mountainside on the opposite side of the valley, across the roaring Urubamba River. The distance was several kilometers, and the destination was a construction site perched high above the valley floor. The question of how they crossed such terrain is a puzzle that has captivated researchers for generations. Engineer and archaeologist Jean-Pierre Protzen conducted practical experiments on site, reconstructing the likely Inca methods. He demonstrated that teams of workers could have moved these giants using a system of log rollers, earthen ramps, and stout wooden levers. Imagine hundreds of people, coordinated by rhythmic calls, inching a monolithic block forward centimeter by centimeter, building the road beneath it as they went, a slow-motion dance of human power and simple physics. The final ascent to the Temple of the Sun platform would have required an immense earthen ramp, a temporary mountain built to raise stones to their permanent home, only to be dismantled once the work was complete. This was not merely construction, it was landscape-scale engineering. The walls themselves reveal a fascinating duality in technique. While the foundation terraces use the familiar, earthquake-resistant polygonal style, the surviving fragments of the Temple of the Sun showcase a different mastery, ashlar masonry. Here, the stones are cut into precise, rectangular blocks with perfectly straight edges and seamless joints, a style reserved for the most sacred spaces. Ollantaytambo served as both a formidable fortress and a royal estate, a place of retreat and control. To stand before the tired stones is to confront the immense social machinery behind these wonders. What level of coordination was required to feed, house, and direct the thousands of laborers needed for such a decades-long project? How did the Inca command not just the loyalty, but the sustained, precise effort of an entire population, moving stones as if they were feathers across a valley? This wall is a testament to logistical genius, proving that the true foundation of their empire was not just stone, but an unparalleled ability to organize human endeavor. High above the sacred valley, the story of stone descends into the very heart of the Inca world. In the center of Cusco, a Spanish colonial church named Santo Domingo rises with its ornate Baroque facade. Yet its true foundation is something entirely different, something far older and more profound. Beneath the convent's floors, supporting its weight for centuries, runs the curved, dark stone wall of the Coricancha, the original Temple of the Sun. This is not just a hidden foundation, it is a powerful metaphor. The colonial structure sits literally and symbolically atop a masterpiece of indigenous engineering, a testament to knowledge that could not be erased, only built upon. The Coricancha was the most sacred site in the Inca Empire, the cosmological axis from which the four quarters of Tawantinsuyu, the land of the four quarters, radiated. Its walls were not merely boundaries, they were a physical prayer. Anthropologist Brian Bauer's research emphasizes that every aspect of its construction served a ritual purpose, aligning the temple with solstice sunrises and the cyclical patterns of the stars. The masonry here reaches its aesthetic zenith. The stones are a dark, finely grained andesite, cut with a precision that feels almost supernatural. Unlike the rugged, pillow-faced blocks of Sacsayhuamán, the Coricancha's surviving walls feature long, elegant courses of perfectly fitted ashlars. The most stunning section is a gracefully curved wall, where each stone is trapezoidal, cut on a subtle radius so that the entire sweep is seamless, without a single straight joint to break the flow. How do you cut a curve into multiple stones so they assemble into a single, unbroken arc? It speaks to a geometry understood not just on paper, but in the hands and eyes of the master masons. This precision served a dual purpose. Practically, the flawless fit and curved design provided immense seismic stability, allowing the wall to dissipate the energy of earthquakes that have repeatedly damaged the colonial church above it. Spiritually, it embodied the Inca worldview. The smooth, continuous curve may have mirrored the horizon, the path of the sun, or the eternal cycle of time. The stone itself, drawn from the earth, was a living entity, pacha, and fitting it perfectly was an act of reverence, a way of weaving the built environment into the sacred tapestry of the cosmos. Here, the blade that cannot penetrate encounters more than a technical marvel. it meets a wall that was quite literally a conversation with the divine. The perfection of the joint was the grammar of that conversation, a language of stability, harmony, and connection that has endured long after the voices that first spoke it fell silent. North of the Inca heartland, where the Andes plunge into the Amazonian cloud forest, another civilization mastered the language of stone. The fortress of Kuelap rises like a great stone ship sailing above a sea of mist, its colossal limestone walls over 60 feet high encircling an entire mountaintop city. This was the domain of the Chachapoya, the warriors of the clouds, a culture whose architectural ambition was matched only by the remoteness of their home. When French explorer Charles Wiener first documented the site in the late 19th century, he wrote of his stunned disbelief, describing a Cyclopean fortress appearing through the fog, a forgotten citadel that seemed to defy both nature and history. To reach Kuelap is to understand its purpose, a long ascent through dense, humid forest that makes any approach from below a laborious challenge for a potential invader. The wall itself is a marvel of phased construction, built in successive layers over centuries, each new course of precisely fitted limestone blocks adding to its imposing height and psychological power. Its most famous feature is the main entrance, a narrow, funnel-like corridor that climbs steeply for nearly 60 feet, forcing any approaching group into a single file line completely exposed to defenders above. This was defense engineered not just with mass but with intelligent, controlling geometry. Yet Kuelap was far more than a fortress. It was a thriving city for thousands, a statement of identity carved in stone. While the exterior walls are sheer and imposing, some interior walls reveal a different artistic sensibility, decorated with intricate geometric friezes, zigzag patterns, and rhomboid designs that may have symbolized eyes, serpents, or the surrounding mountain landscape. This fusion of sheer defensive might with refined symbolic art shows a society deeply connected to its environment, using megalithic precision to create a sanctuary that was both impregnable and meaningful. The Chachapoya builders, working with different materials in a radically different climate than their Inca contemporaries to the south, arrived at the same fundamental principle that perfect fit creates permanence. Their walls, shrouded in cloud, stand as a powerful reminder that this knowledge was not the secret of a single empire, but a recurring answer to the human need for security, community, and a lasting mark upon the world. But the pinnacle of this stoneworking art may lie not in a wall, but in a ruin. On the stark, wind-swept Altiplano of Bolivia, at an altitude that steals the breath, lie the scattered remains of Pumapunku, a structure so precise it feels like a giant stone puzzle box, deliberately shattered and left for us to decipher. Part of the greater Tiwanaku complex, which thrived as a spiritual and political center centuries before the Inca, Pumapunku is not a wall in the traditional sense. It is a testament to a different kind of megalithic ambition, modular, geometric, and bafflingly exact. The site is a field of colossal andesite and red sandstone blocks, each one a masterpiece of cold, calculated engineering. Their surfaces are not just fitted, they are flawlessly flat, polished to a smoothness that rivals modern machine work, with razor-sharp edges and complex, repeating cutouts that speak of a system. Archaeologist Alexei Vranish has studied these ruins extensively, piecing together their logic like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. He suggests the builders used portable grinding stones, likely with sand and water, to achieve those impossible finishes, and that the entire complex was assembled using a standardized unit of measurement, a kind of ancient metric system that allowed for mass production. The most famous components are the so-called H-blocks, massive stone forms with precise notches and symmetrical recesses that look like modern industrial brackets. These were not just decorative, they were functional connectors, designed to interlock with other blocks using a system of mortise and tenon joints, a technique more common in fine woodworking than in multi-ton stone construction. This implies a level of planning and prefabrication that is startling for its era. Each block was shaped off-site to exact specifications, with a confident expectation that it would fit perfectly into the grand design upon arrival, a concept we associate more with a modern factory than an ancient temple. The precision is so extreme, the geometry so pure, that it pushes the boundaries of what we believe was possible with pre-Columbian tools of stone and bronze. This has led to profound and enduring questions. Could the Tiwanaku have used metal clamps, now long since looted, to hold these perfect joints together? Or did they possess a more sophisticated, lost technique for cutting and polishing stone, a knowledge that vanished with their civilization? Pumapunku does not whisper its secrets, it shouts them in a language of perfect angles and vanished connections, a silent monument to a technological peak we are still struggling to comprehend. Across the ocean and millennia, a different kind of power was carved into limestone. The Lion Gate of Mycenae stands as a monumental frown, a single entrance through walls so thick they were said to be built by giants, the Cyclopes of myth. Its massive lintel stone, a single slab weighing many tons, is capped by the famous relieving triangle, a space once filled with a sculpted scene of two lionesses flanking a Minoan-style column. This iconic image is more than decoration, it is a statement. It announces to all who approach that beyond this threshold lies the domain of a ruler whose wealth and might are the stuff of legend, the very Mycenae, rich in gold, that Homer would sing of centuries later. The gate itself is the masterpiece of Cyclopean masonry, a style defined by its use of enormous, roughly shaped blocks, often polygonal, fitted together with a core of smaller stones and rubble filling the gaps. Yet, look closely at the primary joints between the giant stones framing the gateway, and you will see that same principle of precision at work. The faces that bear the structural load are cut and matched with careful intent, creating a stable, interlocked frame that has supported that colossal lintel for over 3,000 years. The construction is a lesson in applied force. Above the lintel, the masonry forms a corbelled arch, each successive layer of stone projecting slightly inward until the space closes at the top. This technique cleverly redirects the immense weight of the wall above outwards and downwards, away from the open passage below, a brilliant solution long before the true arch was common in the region. This was architecture as intimidation. Unlike the harmonic, seismic-resistant walls of the Andes, the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae were designed to project raw, unchallengeable authority. They were the fortifications of warrior kings like the mythical Agamemnon, walls that spoke not of a dialogue with the earth but of a dominion over it. The precision here served a clear, worldly purpose: to create an impregnable stronghold that safeguarded treasure, secured power, and proclaimed that behind such stones a king could feel truly safe. It reveals a fascinating cultural divergence, showing that the same foundational technique of megalithic fitting could be harnessed to embody vastly different values, from spiritual harmony to unabashed martial pride. Only a short distance from Mycenae, the fortress of Tiryns rises from the plain, its walls so massive they seem to the ancient traveler Pausanias to be the work of Cyclopes, giants who alone could move such stones. He wrote that the walls were built of rocks so large that not even a pair of mules could shift the smallest among them, a description that captures the overwhelming physical presence that greets a visitor even today. Tiryns is the ultimate expression of Mycenaean military might, a citadel whose defenses were engineered not just for height, but for astonishing thickness, with some sections of the wall measuring over 7 meters wide enough to contain hidden, vaulted passageways within their very core. These long, corbelled galleries, built entirely within the wall's mass, are a stroke of defensive genius, providing protected storage, movement for troops, and a structural honeycomb that added immense strength. Archaeologist Christophiles Magidis has spent years studying the logistics behind these Cyclopean projects. He suggests that to raise such monstrous limestone boulders, Mycenaean engineers likely employed sophisticated wooden cranes, perhaps a prototype of the later Greek geronos, used in tandem with enormous earthen ramps that snaked up to the rising fortifications. The ramps themselves would have been monumental temporary constructions, only to be dismantled once the wall reached its full, terrifying height. Looking closely at the masonry at Tiryns reveals something fascinating, an evolution in technique. The lowest courses bearing the greatest load often show the most careful work, with polygonal blocks painstakingly shaped to interlock with their neighbors, creating that essential, stable base. Higher up, the style can become more irregular, with the gaps filled with smaller stones, a practical approach that saved time and resources where absolute precision was less critical for structural integrity. This was architecture built to endure both the battering ram and the earthquake, its longevity a direct result of that foundational precision. Every aspect of Tiryns was calculated for psychological and physical dominance, a fortress that did not just resist attack but utterly demoralized the attacker with its sheer, implacable scale. It stands as a masterclass in durable military design, proving that the true strength of a wall lies not just in the weight of its stones, but in the intelligent, interlocked fitting of its deepest foundations. The conical towers of Sardinia rise from the sun-baked earth like ancient stone sentinels, their forms so distinct they seem to belong to a world apart. At the complex of Nuraghe of Barumini, the central Nuraghe stands as the heart of a stone labyrinth, a massive tower built from dark basalt blocks fitted together without a trace of mortar. This is the signature of the Nuraghic civilization, a people who flourished on this Mediterranean island for centuries, leaving behind thousands of these mysterious structures. Their design is a marvel of intuitive engineering, a conical tower built using the corbelling technique, where each successive ring of stones is laid slightly inward until the space closes at the top, forming a domed chamber. The precision here is not in perfectly flat joints, but in a cumulative accuracy, the careful placement of each irregular block ensuring the entire vault distributes its weight downwards and outwards, creating a stable, self-supporting shell. Over generations, as the central tower was expanded and a sprawling village of circular huts grew around it, the masonry evolved. Archaeologist Giovanni Liliu, who led the excavations at Barumini, noted that the earliest stones are rougher, more massive, while later additions show finer workmanship, with blocks cut more squarely and fitted more closely. This reveals a living tradition, a craft honed and perfected over centuries of practice, passed from parent to child. The entire complex was a fortress, a community, and a celestial observatory. Narrow slit windows, often aligned with significant solar events like the solstices, funneled beams of light into the dark interior, marking the passage of the year. The maze-like layout of the surrounding village, with its interconnected walls and hidden passages, provided a formidable defensive advantage, forcing any attacker into a confusing and vulnerable gauntlet. To build such a place was to weave a society into the very landscape, using the local volcanic stone not just as a material, but as an expression of a unique island identity. The Nuraghic people did not seek to conquer distant lands, but to perfect their own, creating communal strongholds that stood for millennia as monuments to a deeply rooted, persistent culture. Their towers ask us a quiet question: what does a civilization choose to build when its gaze is turned inward, focused on community, continuity, and the slow, patient mastery of a single, perfect form? The stone language of the Nuraghe finds a startling echo far to the north, in the rolling hills of central Italy. Here, the town of Alatri is crowned by an Acropolis of such profound antiquity that its origins dissolve into legend, credited by ancient historians to a shadowy, pre-Roman people known as the Pelasgians. Its walls are not built upon the hill, they are an extension of the hill itself, a seamless transition from living bedrock to crafted fortification. The gates to this sacred space are masterpieces of megalithic engineering, formed by colossal monolithic lintels, single stone beams weighing many tons, perched with impossible grace upon polygonal jambs. The fit is so exact, the balance so perfect, that these portals have framed the passage of millennia without shifting. 19th century travelers encountering these works could only describe them with awe as pre-Roman marvels, constructions that seem to belong to a different order of time. The true genius of Alatri lies not just in the size of its stones, but in their artistic, almost organic assembly. This is polygonal masonry in its purest form. The builders did not force the landscape to conform to a grid, they conversed with it. They selected multi-sided limestone blocks and shaped them with an intuitive understanding of geometry, fitting each one to its neighbor like pieces of a colossal, three-dimensional stone puzzle. The walls appear to flow over the contours of the bedrock, following its rises and dips, merging so completely with the natural world that it becomes difficult to discern where the mountain ends and the monument begins. This technique created a structure with a remarkable resilience. A wall made of rigid, rectangular blocks has straight, weak lines, seams that can crack under stress. But Alatri's interlocking polygons have no such lines of failure. The irregular network of joints allows the entire wall to flex and settle as the earth beneath it shifts. It moves with the land rather than fighting against it. This wall represents a philosophy of building in harmony, a precision that sought not to dominate nature, but to become one with it, crafting a fortress that was less an imposition and more an outgrowth of the very stone it stood upon. Descending into the Osireion feels like stepping into a different Egypt entirely. This subterranean chamber at Abydos is perpetually flooded with groundwater, its colossal red granite pillars rising like the trunks of petrified trees from a dark, still pool. The air is cool and heavy, a stark contrast to the sun-baked sandstone of the classic temples above. Here, the architecture speaks in a different, more primal language, one of massive, minimally dressed blocks and joints of uncanny precision that seem to belong to a much older world. The scale is Cyclopean, the aesthetic brutally simple, a stark departure from the detailed hieroglyphs and refined proportions of New Kingdom construction that surrounds it. When Egyptologist Margaret Murray led excavations here in the early 20th century, she was struck by this profound disconnect. She noted the structure's stark, megalithic style seemed to echo a far more ancient tradition, one that predated the dynastic pharaohs by millennia, leading to intense debate about its true age and purpose. Some researchers propose it is a symbolic tomb or cenotaph for the god Osiris, built during the reign of Seti I but deliberately constructed in an archaic, venerable style to connect it to the mythical first time, the Zep Tepi, when the gods were said to have ruled the earth. This idea is powerful. It suggests that precision stonework was not just a technology, but a sacred language. By choosing to build with these enormous, perfectly fitted blocks, later Egyptian architects may have been engaging in an act of architectural reverence, deliberately emulating a style they believed carried the weight and sanctity of a bygone age. The water that fills the chamber adds to this symbolism, possibly representing the primordial waters of none from which all creation emerged, making the Osireion not just a building but a cosmological model. This site challenges our linear view of progress. It presents the possibility that the peak of megalithic precision might not always belong at the beginning of a civilization story, but could be a conscious choice, a stylistic echo used much later to invoke the authority and mystery of a distant past. The Osireion asks us whether the most enduring techniques are sometimes preserved not for their utility, but for their power to connect the present to the very origins of memory. From the shadowed, water-filled crypt of the Osireion, we return to the blinding sunlight of the Giza Plateau, but to a space often overshadowed by the pyramids themselves. The Valley Temple of Pharaoh Khafre is a lesson in hidden power. Its exterior, now partially buried in the desert sands, gives little hint of the profound austerity within. Step inside and the world falls away. You are surrounded by a forest of monolithic red granite pillars and lined by walls of colossal, polished stone blocks, the air cool and still. The sheer mass of the granite is overwhelming, each block weighing many tons, yet the impression is not one of brute force, but of chilling, perfect order. This is where the concept of megalithic precision meets an obsessive drive for finish. The walls reveal a fascinating duality. The core of the structure is built from large limestone blocks, roughly shaped and fitted. But upon this robust skeleton, the builders applied a breathtaking skin. Enormous slabs of red granite from distant Aswan and translucent alabaster were brought in and fitted over the core with joints so tight they are often invisible to the eye, mere hairline fractures in a continuous plane of polished stone. Engineer and archaeologist Mark Lehner has spent decades studying the logistics of this temple. He describes a process of almost unimaginable patience. To shape granite, one of the hardest stones on earth, Egyptian craftsmen used relatively soft copper saws, but the cutting power came not from the metal but from the abrasive. They would pour quartz sand, a material harder than granite, into a cut while dragging the copper blade back and forth. The sand grains embedded themselves in the copper, turning the tool into a kind of millions of tiny, hard teeth, slowly grinding through the rock over days or weeks. For drilling, they used hollow reed or copper tubes, again with abrasive sand, rotating them with a bow to core out holes for door pivots or to create sockets. The final act was the polishing, using progressively finer abrasives, likely from crushed quartz to even finer powders. They rubbed the stone surfaces for untold hours until they achieved a mirror-like sheen that reflected the dim temple light. This was not merely construction, it was alchemy, transforming rough stone into a luminous, eternal shell. Every aspect served a theological purpose. This temple was the gateway where the king's body, arriving by canal from the Nile, was received and prepared for its final journey to the pyramid. The perfection of the stone, its impermeability and reflective quality, was meant to create a divine space, a permanent, unchanging vessel for the king's spirit or ka, intended to endure for eternity. The precision here was the physical manifestation of a promise, a guarantee of permanence in a world of decay, proving that for these builders, technical mastery was ultimately in service of a sacred, timeless ideal. These foundational stones hold the weight of centuries and the hopes of millions. In Jerusalem, the lower courses of the Western Wall, the Kotel, are not just ancient masonry, they are a living testament to a king's ambition carved in stone. These colossal limestone blocks, some stretching over 40 feet long and weighing more than 500 tons, form the retaining wall of the Temple Mount expanded by Herod the Great. The Jewish historian Josephus Flavius, writing decades later, still marveled at the scale, describing the project as the largest ever heard of, a work intended to win the favor of a skeptical populace and secure Herod's legacy. The precision here is unmistakable and distinctive. Look closely at one of these massive ashlars and you will see the hallmark of Herodian masonry, a technique called marginal drafting. The stoneworkers would carve a smooth, perfectly flat frame around the perimeter of the block, leaving a raised, rough central section known as the boss. This was not an unfinished surface, but a brilliant practical and artistic choice. The smooth margins ensured an exceptionally tight, stable fit with the neighboring stones, while the protruding boss made the blocks easier to grip and maneuver during construction with ropes and wooden cranes. Once the wall was complete, the bosses were often left as they were, giving the structure a powerful, textured appearance of rugged strength. The logistics behind this precision were staggering. The limestone was quarried from caves north of the city, where archaeologists have found chisel marks from iron picks and wedges, tools that represented a technological leap from the softer bronze of earlier eras. To move a multi-hundred-ton block, engineers likely used a combination of massive wooden sledges, rollers, and lever systems, hauling them along carefully prepared roads with teams of oxen and laborers. The true challenge was placement. To set these giants into a perfectly level course, builders used a sophisticated system of levels and plumbs, ensuring each stone sat flush with its neighbor, creating that seamless, enduring joint. This was megalithic precision deployed as statecraft. In a politically volatile kingdom, Herod used this monumental engineering not just to support a sacred platform, but as a form of supreme propaganda. The wall declared his power, his resources, and his piety, or at least his desire to be seen as pious, all in one immutable statement of stone. It served to bind his name eternally to the holiest site in Judaism, a calculated fusion of engineering and ideology meant to outlast his own controversial reign. The wall's endurance, its silent presence through empires and upheavals, speaks to a success he could never have fully imagined, where the precision of the fit ultimately mattered more than the fame of the king who ordered it. The need for permanence extended beyond the sacred into the absolutely essential. In the sprawling mortuary temple of Ramesses II at Thebes, the Ramesseum, one finds a structure of a different purpose, a granary. Its walls are not carved from gleaming granite but are a humble yet brilliant composite of mudbrick and stone, a testament to precision applied to the most practical of needs. While the pharaoh's colossal statues proclaimed his glory, these carefully fitted walls safeguarded the kingdom's literal sustenance. Egyptologist Kenneth Kitchen notes that Ramesses was a master of statecraft, and his extensive building projects always included robust infrastructure, understanding that a stable empire required more than monuments. It required secure storage for the grain that fed its people and its armies. The genius of this granary lies in its hybrid construction. The foundation and the critical load-bearing points, like doorways and corners, were built from precisely cut limestone blocks, fitted with the care we've seen in grander temples. This stone skeleton provided a stable, level, and durable base resistant to moisture and settling. Upon this rigid frame, the walls were raised using mud brick, a material made from Nile silt and straw, baked in the sun. But this was no haphazard stacking. The bricks were made to standardized sizes and laid in careful, alternating courses, with a thin layer of mud mortar smoothed between them to create an exceptionally tight seal. The precision here served a vital climatic function. Grain storage is a delicate science threatened by heat, humidity, and pests. These thick, composite walls, sometimes several meters wide, created a powerful insulating barrier. The well-fitted stone foundation blocked rising damp from the soil, while the dense, seamless mud-brick superstructure stabilized the interior environment, keeping it cool and dry through the scorching days and cool nights of the Theban desert. Small, strategically placed ventilation shafts, also framed with stone, allowed for careful air circulation without letting in dust or moisture. This was climate control engineered in mud and stone, a system that protected thousands of tons of wheat and barley from spoilage. It reminds us powerfully that the drive for perfect fit was not solely for the gods or the dead. It was a practical wisdom applied to granaries, warehouses, and cisterns, the unsung architecture that held a civilization together. The precision in these walls was measured not in the reflection of a polished surface, but in the fullness of a harvest safely kept, in the stability of a society that could plan for its future because it had mastered the simple, profound act of preserving its bread. 2 miles of stone snake across a flat, open plain in Boeotia, a perimeter so vast it seems to defy the very idea of a fortress. This is Glar, a Mycenaean stronghold built not on an impregnable hilltop, but on a rocky outcrop rising from a drained lake bed. Its walls, stretching an astonishing circumference, enclose an area larger than the citadels of Mycenae and Tiryns combined. This was not a refuge for a royal household. It was something entirely different, a colossal administrative compound in the heart of fertile farmland. The masonry tells a story of efficiency and scale. Built from the local grey limestone, the walls employ a precise, compact polygonal style, each block carefully shaped to interlock with its neighbors. What is remarkable, as archaeological surveys have consistently noted, is the uniformity of this workmanship across the entire 2-mile circuit. Despite the staggering length, the quality of the fit does not waver, suggesting a single, organized vision and a workforce operating under a strict, standardized method. This was not the artisanal, one-of-a-kind fitting of a sacred temple, but the systematic, reproducible precision of a state-run project. Gla's primary function was economic. In the Mycenaean palatial system, central authority depended on controlling and redistributing agricultural surplus, particularly grain, olive oil, and livestock. Gla sat like a giant warehouse and administrative hub in the middle of the agriculturally rich Kopais basin. Its immense enclosed space was likely filled with storerooms, workshops, and barracks for officials and guards who managed the region's production. The walls here served a dual purpose. They protected immense wealth in the form of harvested goods, and they projected the unchallengeable power of the palace that built them, ensuring that every farmer for miles around understood where their surplus was destined to go. This site reveals a critical evolution in the application of megalithic precision. At Gla, the technique is scaled up from protecting a king's treasure to securing an entire kingdom's economy. It demonstrates that this knowledge was not reserved for the most sacred or royal spaces, but could be deployed as infrastructure, a tool for logistical control. Building 2 miles of precisely fitted wall required a breathtaking command of labor, materials, and geometry, a centralized planning capacity that speaks to the sophisticated bureaucracy of the Mycenaean world. The Wall of Gla is a boundary drawn in stone around the concept of the state itself, proving that the most enduring forms of power are often those that master not just the art of building, but the science of scale. The shimmering procession of dragons and bulls, glazed in lapis and gold, was a spectacle built upon a hidden reality. The Ishtar Gate of Babylon, one of the ancient world's most celebrated wonders, rose as a testament to Nebuchadnezzar II's vision, a monumental entrance to a city of legend. Yet its true strength lay beneath the dazzling surface, in a foundation of precisely cut stone that solved a profound engineering challenge. In a land where the primary building material was sun-dried mud brick, constructing something of this scale and permanence required ingenious adaptation. The German archaeologist Robert Koldewey, who excavated the site in the early 20th century, uncovered the gate's secret, its deep, robust substructure built to anchor the fragile splendor above. The fertile plains of Mesopotamia, blessed by the Tigris and Euphrates, presented a problem. The soft, alluvial soil was prone to shifting and subsidence. To prevent the massive gate from cracking or sinking under its own weight, Babylonian engineers turned to a material they had to import: stone. They quarried limestone from distant regions, cut it into large, rectangular blocks, and laid them in deep, carefully leveled courses beneath the processional way and the gate's towering piers. This was not decorative artistry, it was functional genius. Each stone was shaped and fitted to create a stable, immovable platform that would distribute the immense load evenly and resist the constant threat of ground movement. Upon this rigid stone skeleton, the iconic facade was built, layer upon layer of molded mud brick, each one fired and glazed with vibrant colors to create the images of Marduk's dragon and Ishtar's lion. The precision here served a different master than in the Andes or the Mediterranean. It was the essential answer to a specific environmental constraint. It shows how the core principle of megalithic fitting, the quest for perfect stability, was not a monolithic style but a versatile tool. The Babylonians integrated this technique into their own architectural language, using it not as the final expression, but as the unseen guarantee that their most glorious symbol would endure. The foundation stones, hidden from view, performed the quiet, vital work of making the magnificent illusion above them possible, a reminder that the most brilliant visions often depend on the strength of what remains unseen. The King's Gate of Hattusa is guarded by a figure of silent, eternal power, a warrior god carved directly into the massive stone of the lintel. To pass beneath him is to enter the domain of the Hittites, an empire of chariots and treaties whose capital was ringed by miles of formidable walls snaking over the rugged Anatolian landscape. These fortifications were a masterclass in layered defense, beginning with a foundation of precisely fitted megalithic stone. Archaeologist Eugen Seher, who led excavations here for decades, describes a deliberate and intelligent design. The lower sections, built from locally quarried andesite and limestone, showcase a distinctive Cyclopean style, where large, polygonal blocks were carefully shaped to interlock without mortar. This tight, dry stone base served a critical dual purpose. In a seismically active region, the irregular, interlocked joints allowed the wall to flex and absorb the energy of earthquakes without collapsing. For defense, this stone foundation presented a virtually impenetrable barrier to battering rams, as the massive, tightly wedged stones could not be easily pried loose or shaken apart. Yet the Hittite builders did not rely on stone alone. Upon this resilient stone skeleton, they raised towering upper walls of sun-dried mud brick. This composite construction was a practical marvel. The stone base protected the vulnerable mud brick from ground moisture and enemy sappers, while the lighter brick superstructure allowed for greater height without overburdening the foundation. The entire circuit was punctuated by strategically placed towers for flanking fire and hidden postern gates, allowing defenders to launch surprise counterattacks. This wall was not a single material statement, but a fusion of techniques, each chosen for its specific strength. It represents the Hittite understanding that true security comes from adaptability, from combining the enduring, earthquake-resistant precision of megalithic stone with the rapid, scalable construction of brick. Here, the blade that cannot penetrate forms only the unyielding foundation of an imperial capital designed to project power and withstand any siege, a fortress built as intelligently as the empire it protected. The challenge of Masada was not defense but livability. Perched on an isolated rock mesa overlooking the Dead Sea, this fortress offered supreme security but presented a brutal problem. How do you build a luxurious palace complex on a barren, windswept cliff with almost no flat ground? Herod the Great's answer was a masterpiece of engineered terrain, the hanging terraces. Historian Flavius Josephus, writing decades later, still conveyed a sense of astonishment at the undertaking, describing how Herod, not content with the natural fortress, adorned it with splendid palaces and filled its storehouses with arms, grain, and supplies for a long siege. To create space for these grand structures on the steep northern face, his engineers performed a kind of architectural alchemy. They cut directly into the cliff, carving out a series of three-tiered rock ledges. Upon these precarious shelves, they constructed retaining walls of such precision they became the very foundation of Herod's ambition. Using the local, pale dolomite stone, workers quarried and shaped rectangular blocks, fitting them together with the same tight, marginal drafted joints seen in Jerusalem. But here, the precision served a more urgent physical purpose. These walls had to act as giant containers, holding back thousands of tons of imported earth and rubble to create artificial, level platforms where none existed in nature. Each block had to bear not just the weight of the wall itself, but the immense lateral pressure of the filled earth behind it and the structures built upon it. The fit had to be perfect. A single weak joint could mean a catastrophic collapse, sending a palace terrace sliding down the mountainside. This was precision engineering applied to the problem of extreme scarcity, the scarcity of space. Every fitted stone maximized the usable area, allowing for a northern palace that cascaded down the cliff in a breathtaking display of power over nature, complete with frescoed rooms, bathhouses, and colonnaded walkways. The storehouses, or horia, built on the plateau, followed the same logic of perfect fit, their long, narrow rooms with precisely joined walls designed to preserve vast quantities of food and water in the harsh desert climate. Masada transforms the meaning of megalithic precision. It shows us that this technique was not only for sacred spaces or city walls, but could be the very tool that made the impossible habitable. On that stark rock, the perfect joint was not about eternity, but about creating a sliver of cultivated, controlled luxury in the midst of desolation, a testament to a king who believed that even on the edge of the world, he could build a paradise held together by stone. The gleaming marble of the Parthenon rests upon a far older, darker foundation. Tucked beneath the classical splendor of the Athenian Acropolis, rough-hewn limestone blocks form a ghostly outline, the remnants of a Mycenaean fortress known to later Athenians as the Pelagican. These are the bones of the citadel, a polygonal wall of such enduring strength that it was never fully dismantled, but instead incorporated into the sacred landscape for over 1,000 years. The historian Thucydides himself noted these ancient works, attributing them to the Pelasgians, a shadowy pre-Hellenic people, and observed that classical Athenians held them in deep reverence. The wall's strategic genius is still visible in its placement, following the natural contours of the rock to create a defensive perimeter that maximized the hill's formidable height. Its polygonal blocks, fitted with the familiar, interlocking precision, were not just functional, they became a tangible link to a heroic, mythical past. For the Athenians of the 5th century, living among the sublime achievements of Pericles, these old, dark stones were a physical connection to the world of Homeric kings and the Trojan War, a source of ancestral pride and identity. This wall is a powerful architectural palimpsest, a surface written upon by successive generations. The classical builders did not see the Mycenaean ruins as rubble to be cleared, but as a venerable foundation upon which to erect their own ideals of beauty and democracy. The persistence of this ancient masonry within the heart of their most sacred space shows how megalithic precision could transcend its original purpose. It ceased to be merely a fortification and became a monument to memory itself, a stone anchor tethering a brilliant, forward-looking civilization to the deep, heroic roots of its own story. The perfect fit of these blocks held together more than stone. It held together time, allowing a culture to build its golden age literally upon the shoulders of giants. Across the Indian Ocean, the sun beats down on a different empire of stone. The walls of Great Zimbabwe rise from the southern African savanna, their granite curves echoing the gentle slopes of the surrounding hills. This is not a fortress against invaders, but a monument to wealth, power, and spiritual authority, the heart of a kingdom that thrived on trade from the coast to the interior. At the center of the complex stands the great enclosure, its serpentine outer wall, over 30 feet high in places, winding for nearly 800 feet in a breathtaking display of dry stone mastery. Within this space rests the site's most enigmatic structure, a solid conical tower that seems to mirror the shape of a granary, a powerful symbol of abundance and prosperity. Archaeologist Thomas Huffman's extensive work helps us decode this stone language. He explains that the walls were never meant for military defense in a traditional sense. Their primary function was symbolic, to separate the sacred and royal spaces from the everyday, to denote the immense status of the ruler who resided within, and to project an image of enduring, unmovable power to both subjects and foreign traders. The technique is a distinct regional signature. Builders used locally quarried granite, a stone that naturally fractures into blocks. They selected these pieces with a keen eye, shaping them minimally with harder stone hammers, then fitting them together without any mortar. The skill is evident in the wall's remarkable verticality and stability, courses of stone rising in subtly inward-leaning tiers that have withstood centuries of weather. This precision served a visual purpose as well. In certain sections, most notably in the grand entrance passage of the great enclosure, the masons incorporated stunning decorative patterns. They laid blocks in alternating courses or at opposing angles to create chevron and herringbone designs, a clear demonstration that this was craft elevated to art, a public display of the kingdom's sophistication and resources. Great Zimbabwe was a hub, a place where gold, ivory, and trade goods from across the Indian Ocean world flowed. The walls, therefore, were both a practical administrative boundary and a billboard. They communicated to a Swahili merchant from the coast or a visiting dignitary from a neighboring region that here was a center of gravity, a stable and wealthy polity worthy of respect and commerce. This magnificent complex fundamentally expands our view of megalithic precision. It flourished not in isolation, but as the core of a sophisticated sub-Saharan civilization, proving that the drive to build with perfect mortarless fit was a global human impulse. At Great Zimbabwe, the stones were fitted to hold together not just a wall, but an entire social and economic universe, showing that the most imposing structures are sometimes designed not to keep people out, but to draw the world in. Off the coast of Pohnpei, a city of stone seems to float upon the sea. Nan Madol is a labyrinth of over 90 artificial islets, its canals and waterways weaving between walls of colossal, dark basalt logs that rise directly from the turquoise lagoon. This is not a fortress on land, but a ceremonial metropolis built upon the living coral reef, a place where the boundary between architecture and ocean blurs. The construction technique is as unique as the setting, often called the log cabin style of megalithic masonry. Builders used naturally formed prismatic basalt columns, hexagonal or pentagonal shafts that nature herself had already carved with geometric perfection. These massive stone logs, some weighing many tons, were stacked horizontally to form stable foundations, then placed vertically to create towering walls, all fitted together without mortar. The precision lies in the selection and placement of these ready-made geometric pieces, a brilliant adaptation to the materials at hand. Oral traditions of Pohnpei tell of the Sordelor dynasty, a line of powerful rulers who commanded this work. The stories speak of magic and levitation, of the god-like brothers Olasipa and Olasopa who first raised the stones, myths that arose to explain a feat that seemed, and still seems, superhuman. The reality, while grounded in immense human effort, is no less staggering. Transporting these dense basalt columns from quarries across the island to the reef's edge was a Herculean task. Researchers like archaeologist Rufino Mauricio suggest they were likely moved on bamboo rafts or floated during high tide, a slow, perilous journey across open water. Once at the site, the greater challenge began, creating a stable foundation in the dynamic marine environment. Builders would first construct a cage of coral rubble on the shallow reef flat, then carefully place the largest basalt logs horizontally within this frame to create a stable platform resistant to wave action and tidal forces. Only then could the vertical walls rise, each interlocking column carefully chosen and positioned to lock its neighbors in place. This was not a haphazard pile. It was a three-dimensional stone puzzle solved in one of the most demanding environments on Earth. Nan Madol served as the spiritual and administrative heart of the Sordelor realm, with specific islets dedicated to ceremonies, food preparation, and royal residence. The precision of its walls, therefore, served a profound purpose. In a place constantly shaped by water, wind, and storm, this tight, interlocked construction was the only way to achieve permanence. It transformed a temporary, shifting landscape into a fixed point of human order and power. This wall shows us that megalithic precision is not a single formula, but a flexible principle. When your building blocks are already perfect polygons from a volcano's heart, and your foundation is the living sea, the genius lies in listening to the materials and the environment, and fitting them together into something that defies both waves and time. Spirals carved into ancient limestone seem to pulse with a quiet, eternal energy. Within the walls of Malta's Tarxian temples, art and architecture are not separate disciplines, they are a single language written in stone. These are not fortifications, but sanctuaries. Their massive coralline limestone slabs fitted together to create the oldest free-standing stone structures in the world, predating even the pyramids of Giza. The walls here achieve something remarkable. They marry immense physical presence with the most delicate artistic expression. Alongside the perfectly joined blocks, you find panels covered in intricate spiral motifs, patterns of drilled dots, and bas-relief carvings of animals, all executed with a patience that feels devotional. Archaeologist John D. Evans spent years studying these sites, noting that the temples were precisely aligned to celestial events, their doorways and altars catching the rising sun on specific solstices or equinoxes. This was architecture as a calendar and a compass, built to harmonize human ritual with the cycles of the cosmos. The construction method itself reveals a profound, patient ingenuity. The builders mastered the post and lintel system, erecting huge stone uprights and then carefully levering enormous capstones into place across the top to form doorways and roofs. To move these multi-ton slabs of coralline limestone from nearby quarries, they likely used a simple yet effective technology, stone balls. Dozens of these spherical rollers have been found at temple sites. By placing the megalith on a track of wooden logs and using levers to shift it onto the stone balls, teams could slowly, incrementally roll the block forward, a process of monumental effort repeated for generations. The Tarxian complex was not built in a single campaign. It evolved over 1,000 years with new chambers and altars added, walls rebuilt, and sacred spaces refined by successive generations. This long timeline shows that the precision was not a fleeting innovation, but a sustained tradition, a sacred craft passed down and perfected within a stable, deeply spiritual society. Here, the perfect fit of the stone served a purpose beyond stability. It created a sealed, sacred container. The tightly joined walls would have helped to contain the sounds of rituals, the smell of incense and offerings, focusing the sensory experience of the ceremonies within. The spiral carvings, perhaps symbolizing life, rebirth, or the turning heavens, transformed the architecture itself into a teaching tool, a visual hymn. This wall from Neolithic Malta offers a profound insight that the earliest impulse toward megalithic precision may have been fundamentally spiritual. It was not first about defense or storing grain, but about creating a permanent home for the divine, a perfectly fitted stone chamber where a community could meet its gods and mark the passage of the stars, building a legacy meant to guide life for 100 generations. Beneath the clear, blue waters off Japan's westernmost island lies a mystery that challenges the very definition of a wall. The Yonaguni Monument is a sprawling collection of submerged sandstone formations, their sharp, terraced faces rising from the ocean floor like the steps of a drowned pyramid. From the moment diver Kihakaru Aratake first sighted them in the 1980s, a fierce debate has raged. Are we looking at a stunning feat of natural erosion, or the sunken ruins of a precise megalithic culture lost to rising seas? The controversy centers on the monument's uncanny geometry. Certain features exhibit strikingly straight edges, apparent right angles, and flat platforms stacked in a tiered formation that feels deliberately orchestrated. Two prominent voices embody the opposing sides of this debate. Geologist Robert Schoch, known for his work on the Great Sphinx, argues for a natural origin. He points to the region's active seismic activity and the natural tendency of sandstone to fracture along straight plains and horizontal bedding, creating the illusion of carved architecture through the powerful, repetitive forces of tides and currents over millennia. On the other side, researcher Masaaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus has spent decades studying the site. He identifies specific features that he argues are unlikely to be natural, including what appear to be carved staircases, triangular basins, and even a structure resembling a carved face. The debate is complicated by the history of sea levels. At the peak of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, global sea levels were over 100 meters lower, meaning the Yonaguni formations would have been well above water, exposed as part of the coastline. This time frame opens a tantalizing possibility. Could an ancient culture have modified these natural rock terraces, enhancing their geometric forms for ceremonial or practical purposes? The site forces us to confront a profound and reflective question. In our search for megalithic precision, how do we distinguish the hand of a human craftsperson from the patient, sculpting hand of nature? Water and wind, given enough time, can produce forms of breathtaking regularity and apparent design. The Yonaguni monument, whether a spectacular natural sculpture or a genuine archaeological treasure, serves as a crucial test case. It asks us to refine our eyes, to look beyond the immediate impression of right angles and flat surfaces, and to seek the subtle signatures of intent. Does a straight edge show the repetitive strike of a tool, or the clean fracture line of a seismic event? This underwater puzzle pushes our investigation to its limits, reminding us that the most compelling mysteries often lie in the blurred boundary between the world as we find it and the world as someone, long ago, might have chosen to shape it. The weight of a small hill rests upon a circle of stones. At the Dolmen de Menga in southern Spain, the central chamber is roofed by a single limestone slab estimated to weigh 180 tons, a burden held aloft for over 5,000 years. While this colossal capstone captures the eye, the true genius of the structure lies in the walls that support it, a masterclass in Neolithic dry stone engineering that established principles of precision from the very dawn of monument building. This is not a fortress or a temple in the traditional sense, but a passage grave, a communal resting place that demanded permanence. The builders faced a fundamental challenge: how to stabilize an enormous earthen mound and prevent the colossal upright stones, the orthostats, from shifting inward under the immense pressure. Their solution was a blend of brute strength and meticulous detail. After erecting the massive vertical slabs that form the chamber's walls, they filled the gaps between each stone and the surrounding earth with a carefully constructed packing of dry stone masonry. This was not random rubble. Thousands of smaller, carefully selected limestone pieces were fitted together like a three-dimensional puzzle, creating a solid, interlocked matrix that distributed the weight of the mound evenly and locked the orthostats firmly in place. Archaeologists note the use of strategic shims, smaller flat stones deliberately inserted to correct minor irregularities and ensure perfect vertical alignment. This precise packing acts as a permanent counterforce, a silent partner to the megaliths that ensures the entire structure moves as one with the settling earth. The site's UNESCO World Heritage status recognizes not just its age, but this sophisticated understanding of static forces and communal effort. The scale implies a society capable of organizing hundreds of people, not for war, but for a shared spiritual project that would outlast countless generations. Furthermore, the dolmen's orientation adds another layer of intention. Its long axis is aligned not to the rising sun, but to a nearby mountain peak, La Peña de los Enamorados, a natural landmark that likely held deep symbolic meaning. This tells us the precision extended beyond the physical fit of stone. It was part of a larger harmony between the built environment and the sacred landscape. Here, at the very roots of megalithic tradition, we see the core idea fully formed, that perfect fitting creates an eternal embrace. The stones of Menga were not merely stacked, they were woven together into a stable whole, a testament to a Neolithic community that looked at a mountain of earth and a hill of stone and saw, within it, a legacy meant to hold forever. Green terraces cascade down the mountainside like steps for giants, each one a perfect, curving line of dark stone holding back a mirror of sky. This is the Subak landscape of Pingan in Bali, where megalithic precision finds its most life-giving expression, not in a fortress or a tomb, but in a wall that cradles water and nourishes a civilization. For over 1,000 years, these meticulously fitted stone terraces have transformed the volcanic slopes of the Indonesian highlands into a breathtaking, living mosaic of rice paddies. The achievement here is not measured in the height of the barrier, but in its gentle, enduring functionality. This is precision applied to the most vital of human arts, agriculture, and it reveals a philosophy of building that is inseparable from a philosophy of life. Anthropologist Stephen Lansing spent decades studying this system, uncovering the profound wisdom encoded within its stone and water. He identified the guiding principle as Trihita Karana, a Balinese Hindu concept meaning the three causes of well-being, harmony among people, with the gods, and with the natural world. The terrace walls are the physical manifestation of this idea. Every stone is placed not just to hold soil, but to participate in a sacred, ecological balance. Local communities quarry the dark, porous volcanic rock, cutting it into manageable blocks. These are then fitted together without any mortar, a dry stone technique we have seen across the globe. But here, the purpose of the perfect join is uniquely dynamic. The tight fit prevents precious topsoil from washing away during the relentless tropical rains, yet the lack of mortar creates a slight, intentional flexibility. The walls can shift and settle without cracking, and the tiny gaps between stones allow for controlled drainage and aeration, preventing waterlogged roots and soil collapse. This is a wall designed to breathe, to move, and to manage the constant flow of water from the mountain temples above, through a democratic network of canals and weirs to every single farm plot below. The maintenance of this vast, interconnected system is not governed by a king or a central authority, but by the water temple cooperatives, democratic associations of farmers who gather at local temples to make collective decisions. They schedule planting, coordinate repairs to the terrace walls and canals, and perform rituals to honor the goddess of the lake and the spirits of the water. The precision of the masonry is therefore a social technology as much as an engineering one. It requires ongoing cooperation, shared knowledge passed from generation to generation, and a collective commitment to stewardship. A poorly maintained wall in one terrace can cause a cascade of failure for all the farms downstream, so every farmer has a vested interest in upholding the standard of perfect fit. This creates a resilient, self-regulating community bound together by stone and water. The terraces of Pingan stand as a powerful, living counterpoint to the imposing fortresses we have seen. This wall does not exclude, it includes. It does not proclaim the power of a single ruler, but the collective intelligence and spiritual commitment of an entire culture. It demonstrates that the highest application of megalithic precision may not be in creating monuments to the dead, but in sustaining the systems that support the living. Here, the blade that cannot penetrate is not a test of defense, but a testament to harmony, a perfectly joined stone ensuring that clear water continues to flow, and that the green steps of the mountain will feed generations yet to come. This is a wall that grows food, a wall that holds a community together, and a wall that quietly argues that the most advanced technology is sometimes the one that aligns perfectly with the world it inhabits. Deep in the Siberian taiga, where winter locks the land in silence, a different kind of cold mystery lies scattered across the mountainside. The Gornaya Shoria region holds a sight that defies easy explanation: colossal granite blocks, some estimated to weigh over 3,000 tons, resting at impossible angles. Their surfaces are startlingly flat, their edges meet in crisp, sharp corners, and they are stacked in formations that look eerily like the fallen pillars of a Titan's temple. This is not a wall in any conventional sense, but a field of megalithic puzzles, our final and perhaps most controversial stop. To stand among these stones is to feel a profound disorientation, as if you have stumbled upon the raw materials for a city that was never built, or the ruins of one that was utterly shattered. The sheer scale is humbling, set against a backdrop of dense, remote wilderness that adds to the aura of a secret kept by the mountains themselves. Explorers and researchers who have reached the site often describe a sense of awe mixed with complete bewilderment. One geologist noted that the formations challenged his every assumption, while an alternative history investigator wrote of the overwhelming feeling that these were not random stones, but pieces of a colossal, intentional design. The central question hangs in the frigid air: are we looking at a masterpiece of natural geology, or the fragmented evidence of a prehistoric civilization possessing unimaginable technology? The scientific explanation points to powerful, slow-moving forces within the Earth itself. Granite, formed from cooling magma deep underground, can fracture in remarkably regular ways through a process known as exfoliation or sheeting. As overlying rock erodes away, the release of immense pressure causes the granite to expand and crack along natural planes of weakness, often creating slabs with flat surfaces and sharp angles. Freeze-thaw cycles over millennia can further accentuate these fractures, prying the blocks apart and giving them their seemingly stacked appearance. Geologists argue that the uncanny regularity at Gornaya Shoria is simply a spectacular, but entirely natural, example of this planetary sculpting. The fractures follow the inherent crystal structure of the granite, and what looks like precise tool marks could be the result of glacial scouring or persistent weathering along those fracture lines. From this perspective, the site is a magnificent work of art, but the artist is time, pressure, and elemental physics. Yet the human mind is pattern-seeking, and the patterns here are deeply compelling. The blocks do not appear randomly strewn. Many are positioned in stacked, almost layered arrangements, with smaller, rectangular stones perched atop gigantic bases. Some angles appear perfectly right, some surfaces seem suspiciously level. This visual language of straight lines and flat planes is one our brains instinctively associate with design and intention, not chaotic natural forces. It is this persistent, nagging regularity that fuels alternative theories. Could these be the remains of Cyclopean walls or foundations, quarried and shaped by a culture lost to the ice ages? The proponents of this view ask difficult questions. How does natural fracturing account for the multi-tiered, platform-like formations? What process creates such clean, 90-degree intersections high on a remote mountainside? The debate is less about the existence of natural geological processes and more about their limits. At what point does the observed geometry exceed what we can reasonably expect from nature alone? This final, silent field of stone leaves us not with an answer, but with a profound and humbling reflection. Gornaya Shoria acts as a perfect bookend to our journey, returning us to the fundamental ambiguity we began with, the razor blade at the seam. It forces us to confront the blurred line between a world that makes itself and a world that was made. How much of what we dismiss as natural wonder might still hold the faint fingerprints of a forgotten hand? And if these are merely spectacular geology, they still perform a vital function. They stretch our imagination and challenge our certainty. They remind us that the Earth is capable of creating its own perfect fits and astonishing geometries, independent of human intervention. Yet the possibility, however remote, that we might be looking at something else, something profoundly ancient and human, keeps the mystery alive. It suggests that the story of megalithic precision, of walls no blade can penetrate, may still have chapters buried in the most remote corners of the world, waiting not for tools to decipher them, but for the openness to question what we think we already know. Our search for these walls, in the end, becomes a search for ourselves, for the limits of our understanding, and for the quiet, persistent possibility that the past is far stranger and perhaps far more advanced than our history books have ever dared to record. A global tapestry was woven not with thread but with stone. From the cloud forests of Peru to the Siberian taiga, a recurring architectural language emerges, one built upon a handful of profound and simple techniques. The most universal is dry stone fitting, the art of joining massive blocks without any mortar or binding agent. This was not a shortcut, but a deliberate choice that demanded the highest level of skill. The perfect joint itself became the glue, creating structures that could flex and breathe with the earth. Within this broad category, specific styles flourished. Polygonal masonry, seen from Alatri to Sacsayhuamán, used multi-sided blocks to create an interlocking, earthquake-resistant puzzle. Modular construction, as at Pumapunku or in the standardized bricks of Mesopotamian foundations, points to a mindset of planning and prefabrication. The toolkits, though varying by region, revolved around a mastery of force and abrasion. Stone hammers and bronze chisels were used for rough shaping, while the final, impossible smoothness was achieved with patient, relentless grinding using sand, water, and harder stone powders. This was a technology of immense patience, where the measure of progress was not in speed, but in the gradual disappearance of the seam between two rocks. How do we explain this tapestry? Mainstream archaeology offers a compelling framework of convergent evolution. Scholars point to the universal laws of physics and the common human challenges of defense, storage, and venerating the sacred. Faced with the need to build something permanent, brilliant minds in isolated cultures could independently arrive at the same logical conclusion: that a perfectly fitted dry stone wall is inherently stronger and more durable than one reliant on weaker binding materials. Practical problem solving, driven by local environmental pressures like seismic activity or heavy rainfall, naturally led to these innovations. The development is seen as gradual, a slow accumulation of knowledge passed down through guilds of masons, each generation refining the techniques of the last. This view emphasizes the incredible diversity of human ingenuity sprouting independently across the globe. Yet, the sheer sophistication and widespread similarity of the most precise works have fueled alternative lines of inquiry. Researchers like the late John Anthony West looked at the stonework of Giza and the Osireion, noting the stark stylistic difference from later dynastic work, and questioned the conventional timeline, wondering if these techniques represent a much older, lost epoch of construction. Engineers like Christopher Dunn have analyzed the tool marks and tolerances on Egyptian granite, proposing that the precision implies manufacturing methods more advanced than the simple copper and stone tools typically acknowledged. These more speculative theories often ask whether a common, archaic source of knowledge could have existed, a forgotten chapter in human history where these principles were discovered and then dispersed, perhaps by ancient seafarers or a pre-flood civilization, only to be rediscovered and imperfectly replicated by later cultures. This perspective listens to the global echo and hears not independent invention but a distant, single origin. Weighing these views is not about choosing sides in a simplistic debate, but about understanding the full spectrum of wonder. Traditional scholarship provides the essential foundation, the meticulously researched context of cultures, timelines, and practical needs. It reminds us that ancient people were every bit as intelligent and capable as we are. The more speculative theories, even when controversial, perform a different and vital service. They challenge complacency. They force us to re-examine assumptions about the pace of technological progress and remain open to possibilities that our current historical model may not yet accommodate. They keep the mystery alive and pressing, so we are left with a reflective and perhaps unanswerable question. Does this global tapestry of precision ultimately testify to the fundamental brilliance of the human mind, an ingenuity that naturally crystallizes into similar forms when confronted with the timeless desire for permanence? Or do these stones, in their silent, perfect harmony, whisper of a deeper, shared origin, a fragment of knowledge from a forgotten age that haunts our collective memory? The answer may be less important than the question itself, for it is in this space of mystery that we are compelled to look closer, to respect the past more deeply, and to marvel at the enduring power of a perfectly placed stone. The journey across continents and millennia reveals a profound human constant, this relentless drive to build with imperishable precision. We have stood before walls that defended empires and housed gods, structures that stored the grain of kingdoms and shaped the very mountains they stood upon, all united by a single, silent testament, joints no blade can penetrate. These are not random acts of monumental effort, but deliberate choices, a global language of stone that speaks of priorities deeper than mere shelter or security. They challenge the comfortable narrative of linear progress, forcing us to fundamentally rethink the capabilities, the patience, and the profound observational genius of ancient cultures. The resilience of this knowledge, echoing from desert to jungle, from island to mountain peak, suggests a wisdom not easily lost, but perhaps one we have simply forgotten how to see. These walls are far more than silent relics of a distant past. They are active, patient teachers. Their lessons are written in the language of fitted stone, a curriculum of harmony, patience, and profound observation. They teach us that true strength often lies not in forcing materials to conform, but in understanding their inherent nature and working with it. They demonstrate that a project worthy of eternity cannot be rushed, that it demands the slow, careful accumulation of skill across generations. Most importantly, they remind us that the most enduring human creations are frequently those that seek a dialogue with the world, rather than a dominion over it. The perfect fit is a form of respect for the stone, for the landscape, and for the future. As we leave these stone sentinels behind, a final reflection lingers. Which of these 25 sites resonated most deeply with you? Was it the sacred geometry of Pumapunku, the communal harmony of Bali's terraces, or the sheer willpower etched into the tired stones of Ollantaytambo? Consider, too, how this ancient, global pursuit of perfection might whisper to our modern world of steel and glass. In an age of rapid construction and disposable materials, what could we learn from a philosophy that builds for 1,000-year storm, or for 100 generations yet unborn? The quest for a joint no blade can penetrate is ultimately a quest for legacy, a desire to speak to the future in the most durable language we know. If this exploration of stone and spirit has moved you, we invite you to join us for more journeys into history's deepest mysteries. Please subscribe to continue unraveling the threads of our shared past, and share your own thoughts on these megalithic marvels in the comments below. The conversation, like the walls themselves, is meant to endure.